Welcome to the video, y'all. As you can see in today's video, we are talking about Wyoming and Delaware LLCs, a very common setup that a lot of people believe they should start and set up their LLCs and their businesses in these states. But I am going to tell you why 99% of you should not do this, why it doesn't really make sense. But before we do that, let's actually talk about why people typically recommend these states for LLC setups. And I'll give you the reasons why the majority of the time, unless you're in a specific circumstance or a specific situation or business, that you shouldn't do it. So let's talk about it. Why do people choose Wyoming or Delaware in the first place? A lot of people come on to the internet not really understanding the importance of an LLC or where to set it up or how to set it up. And typically one of the first videos that they see is someone saying, set it up in these states, Wyoming or Delaware. So they run onto a YouTube video or get that information and then they set it up in those states. Reason being is Wyoming is typically a lot more popular than that of Delaware, especially in my business where I run into clients who have set up their businesses in Wyoming because of this reason. It's also very popular in the real estate niche. A lot of people who are real estate investors have LLCs for a lot of their properties. For whatever reason, that industry, everyone tells them to set it up in Wyoming. But let's explain why. Wyoming is very well known for asset protection and privacy. So they're famous for the anonymous ownership, which is essentially your information just isn't public. Your full name, the owner of the LLC, the address, all of that information is not meant to be public so that people can know that. So it has that anonymous factor to it and privacy factor to it. Now, there is some asset protection, which I'll talk about later, which is another reason why people set it up in that state. But for most people, that does not make sense whatsoever. Now, Delaware is very well known for having business-friendly legal precedent, meaning the courts are, much more leaning towards businesses if they're in lawsuits or being sued in particular situations. So they have stronger protections for owners in lawsuits on the business side. The other recommendation on why a lot of people say it's a good idea is no state income tax. I'll talk about why that doesn't really matter, and there's other states that have no state income tax. Wyoming, 0 state income tax. Delaware, no tax on out-of-state income. They also talk about cheaper filing fees and maintenance. We all know that California is the most expensive by far when it comes to filing fees and annual reporting, but the majority of other states are pretty similar. And so I'll break down why the filing fees aren't that big of a deal. It's like a $50 to $150 swing. Either way, Wyoming is a little bit on the cheaper end with a $60 annual renewal fee. Delaware, the annual renewal fee is much higher, and it's actually not that much cheaper. Typically, a lot of people say Wyoming and Delaware are just more legitimate. And sometimes when people run into these videos, they also mention the protections that Wyoming and Delaware provide when it comes to not being sued for your personal assets. And so I want to explain to all of you, if you're unaware, that the importance of an LLC, no matter where the state, it could be Georgia, it could be Tennessee, it could be Florida, it could be Wyoming or Delaware. The purpose of an LLC is that it protects you from being sued for your personal assets. The LLC itself is protection. So no matter what state it is, the LLC provides you that protection. Where if you are a sole proprietor and you don't have an LLC backing you, right, they can still come for your personal assets. For example, you own a rental property and you have that under an LLC, and your tenant trips, falls, breaks their leg, and they decide to sue you as the homeowner, then they cannot sue you and your personal assets because the property is under the LLC. They can sue the LLC, but they can't come for your personal assets. So no matter what state it is in, the LLC provides you that protection. So I just wanted to explain that. I know that was a little bit long-ended, but there seems to be a huge misconception that only Wyoming and Delaware have that protection when that is not the case. That's every LLC, so it does not matter. Now, why does this not matter for 99% of people, the majority of people? If you're trying to save money, filing fees and annual renewal fees aren't that big of a deal. You're talking about a $50 to $100 swing. So Delaware has a filing fee of $110. The majority of filing fees in every state outside of California, right, are $70 to $150. So not that big of a deal. Now, Delaware is actually more expensive in my opinion because they have a flat franchise tax each year, and that is technically the annual renewal. $300 for an annual renewal is more than mine in the state of Florida, which is no state income tax there. Mine was $125, I believe, in Florida. And most annual renewal fees are between $50 and $150. So there's really not that much of a difference, especially when it comes to Delaware. Yes, Wyoming is a little bit cheaper. The filing fee is still $100. The annual renewal is $60. But if you don't live in those states, if you live in Wyoming or Delaware, then go right ahead, set up your business in those states because you live there. It's going to make it so much easier on you because you already have addresses there. But you're not saving any money in terms of the filing fees and renewal fees if you don't live there because you still have to pay for a registered agent service. You still have to pay for a virtual address under your LLC. Your LLC still has to have verification that you're in that state. And so that's going to cost you $50 to $200 a month extra anyways, because you still have to have an address in that state. You still have to have a verified place where they can send mail. Now, when it comes to no state income tax, If you live in these states that don't have no state income tax, Florida, Texas, Nevada, South Dakota, Washington, Alaska, Tennessee, New Hampshire, then set it up in those states. You have no state income tax. There's not really any other benefit, less compliance, less paperwork, all of that. Now, this is the real reason why I say most people shouldn't. Most people shouldn't, because when you're starting an LLC, when you're starting your business, when you're doing this, you want to make things as easy as possible, from taxes, from paperwork, from a compliance standpoint. If you live in another state, you still owe that state. You still have to do taxes in that state. You still have to do taxes in the state of your LLC. So if it's a separate state, you're having to do two things of paperwork. And now you have to file in two different states. So it's just more cost, it's more complexity, it's more compliance, it's more things that you have to think about rather than just doing it in the state that you're in. And so you might have maybe saved $50 to $100, but then you're just causing more issues and confusion later on, which we don't want. Now, the most important thing, especially in my side of the industry, is I run into clients that have this, that were recommended it, that just believe they should set it up in the state of Wyoming because they ran into a video, is you're actually putting yourself at a disadvantage if you want capital to grow and scale your business. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, former athletes, people that want to build businesses and scale them. And the problem is Wyoming is not a huge cosmopolitan area. Not a lot of people live in Wyoming, so there are not a lot of mid-tier banks, credit unions, and other banking options. So if you're looking to extend the ability to access $50,000 to $150,000 every single year for 3-4 years, you don't really have that option. There's not as many banks in the state of Wyoming. Now you have your national banks, right? Chase, Wells, and US Bank. They can only go so far, and they only have certain products. So you have much less banking options if you want more capital, much less options to get funding. You don't have the ability to build relationships in person, which can definitely help and improve your chances. If you are someone that already has a business or an LLC set up in these states, what you can do to improve that is what is called foreign filing. Now, foreign filing means your LLC might be set up in Wyoming, but you do business in another state. So let's say you foreign file in the state of Florida. You now have a Wyoming LLC. Your business is foreign filed in Florida, which means you do business in Florida, which then gives you access to banks in the state of Florida. This gives you more options, but that is still more complexity. That's still something that you need to figure out if you want to make it easy. How do I foreign file in this state? You can ask ChatGPT. It'll give you a pretty easy and simple process. It's going to cost some more money. It's also going to involve more compliance, which means you still have to file paperwork in both of those states. So this is why I say do it in your own state, and then eventually, if you want access to other banking options in the future, you can foreign file later. But once your business is making money and you're having success, then there we go. Other thing, which is huge, is I don't think privacy matters for the majority of people's circumstances. Wyoming is known for asset protection. I said we'd talk about this. Asset protection and anonymous laws. The only reason the anonymous laws can come into play is if you're, super famous, or you're on social media, or you have a very popularized name. You don't want people to know your business or your LLC. Maybe you set it up in Wyoming, and because of that, you have social presence. So you're probably, whatever business you set up, you're going to be able to get traction and make money right away. So that would be the anonymous law factor of it. Now, the asset protection factor is you shouldn't even be thinking about that until you have millions of dollars, until you have tons of assets. So if you're someone that is already a large corporation, you're already, a tech corporation, you already have millions of dollars in revenue, or you already own a ton of assets. Let's say you are a large real estate investor and you already own 20 homes, or you have a ton of assets already, then it makes sense for the asset protection. But if you do not have that, which 90% of people do not, it doesn't make sense. What you can do is once you make money and once you start adding assets to your portfolio, then eventually you can open up an LLC or have a holding company in the state of Wyoming to be able to help protect those assets, if that makes sense. But for the majority of people, it doesn't make sense to start your business in a state that you don't live in for these reasons unless you have that specific circumstance. Other reason it makes sense is international business, people that are international business investors, or they are actually foreign individuals who have access to the US credit system. They are moving money around, they have that protection and that privacy, then it makes sense as well for those people. That is what really makes sense for Wyoming. When it comes to Delaware, if you're trying to be like a big tech company or you're looking for VC funding and capital. But the other reason why Delaware doesn't really make sense at all is because if you're looking to be in lawsuits and be sued a lot or scam and do all of that, maybe Delaware makes sense, but I would say that the majority of people do not plan on doing that. And do not plan on being in lawsuits and being sued quite often. Unless you're in VC funding or pharmaceutical, which can be companies that can be sued quite a bit, then Delaware might make sense for them. That's why I think the majority of most people starting a business, building a business, Wyoming and Delaware just don't make any sense at all. Now, what should you do instead? Well, register in the state you live in. I think I've kind of made that pretty clear. Easier banking, easier taxes, easier compliance, easier paperwork. It's just easier. You can do this by yourself for a few years until you want to hire an accountant. And then once you start making a lot of money and maybe getting assets, then eventually you could possibly get a holding company in these states if you want to. If you want to do a no state income tax in another state, you can always foreign file later. Or if you already have a Wyoming LLC, you can foreign file to expand your banking footprint. Those are kind of the options. Just set it up in your state, make it easier on yourself. Number two, focus on the real leverage when building a business, which is being able to access capital, business credit, banking relationships. When you have it in your state, you can show up. You can build relationships with those bankers. You can work with someone like me directly who can show you a real strategy blueprint on the banks in your state that you should go to maximize capital and how to maximize your ability to get capital, especially during this time. Not a plug and play process that a lot of people do. You want to focus on that. Focus on the banks near you, building relationships with those banks, those credit unions, so that you can max that out and eventually maybe you can foreign file in other states, but really focus on the real leverage there. Like I said, Wyoming and Delaware, they only make sense for certain situations. And so that's really going to tee up this video. I want to make this because there are a lot of videos not really explaining the reasons for a Wyoming and Delaware LLC outside of the positives. I don't really think it makes sense for the majority of people. If you guys like the video, if you guys have questions, drop them down in the comments down below. Hit like and subscribe if you guys haven't. And if you are a business owner, an entrepreneur, a former athlete looking to access capital and looking to have a real strategy, then feel free to reach out to me in the link down below. Link is down below. We can see if it makes sense and see if we can put something great together for you. And as always, appreciate the time and the attention. We'll see you guys in the next video.